Now, whenever you're doing an experiment, you must do it multiple times. Okay, so that particular experiment, it has to be repeated multiple times in order to ensure that what you're getting is in fact true. And another important thing, or that I used to do it back in my old lab, is that we will have two different individuals working on the same project, and at the end, when we had completed that experiment, we will come together and we will show each other our results. Okay, and to me, I feel that that's the best type of study or experiment that you can actually have. Another important thing to consider when you're doing an experiment is the sample size. So the sample size is the number of individuals that you have in the control group and the number of individuals that you have in the experimental group. Now, sample size is extremely important to have statistical significance, essentially to determine if in fact what you're getting from the experimental group and the control group is significant or is important, if you will. Okay. Now, depending on what experiment you're doing, is going to determine the sample size that you need. So let me give you a silly example. Let's imagine, and this has been done actually, this has been done many times. So let's say that I have a quarter. Okay, so a quarter has heads or tails, and if I only flip it twice, let's say twice, right? And just by chance, let's say that both of those instances I got heads, then I can make the wrong conclusion. I can say, you know what, if you flip the coin a third time, then you're gonna get heads again. Okay, and it's because my sample size, if you will, in this case, it's only n of 2. Now, if you flip the coin, let's say up to 2,000 times, it is basically known that you're gonna get 50% heads and 50% tails. But as you can see, in this case, my sample size is basically large or is big. So after you have collected data, after you have analyzed the data, after you have carried your experiment, then the last step is to publish your results in scientific journals. And the beautiful part about publishing your results in scientific journals is that anybody around the world can actually read your experiment. Okay. So if many people are continuing to test your hypothesis and the results of those experiments still support that hypothesis, then that specific hypothesis becomes what we call a scientific theory. So a scientific theory is a hypothesis that has been tested time after time after time, and the results of those tests still support that hypothesis. Now, we use theory in everyday language the wrong way. So let me give you an example. I mean, if I have a conversation with someone, I can say, oh, I think it's gonna rain today. It's just a theory that I have. Have I tested that hypothesis? No. And as we already know, a theory is a hypothesis that has been tested time after time after time. And that results of those experiments support that hypothesis. Some examples of theories are the cell theory, which states that all living organisms are made out of cells. Another theory is the theory of evolution, that all living organisms are essentially evolving or are changing. And we will actually devote an entire chapter, or actually multiple chapters rather, talking about evolution. Now, it might be true that drinking caffeinated coffee can have some positive side effects. And a lot of times what happens, it's that people tend to focus on only of the positive effects without giving you the full story. And this is what I mean by you have to do your research as well. So these are some of the negative side effects of drinking coffee. So it makes you more nervous, it makes you more anxious, increase in headaches, and it actually gives you insomnia. It actually increases the chances of getting a heart attack. And there's basically many negative side effects to drinking caffeinated coffee. So this is extremely important for all of us that before you take anything, it doesn't matter what it is, that you must know the full story, that you must do your own research. Now, correlation is basically a consistent relationship between two variables. So if you have variable A and variable B, if variable A goes up, then variable B goes up as well. Now, just because two variables are correlated, that doesn't mean that one variable is what causes the second variable. So let me give you an example to prove this. So we know that during the summer, the sales of ice cream go up. We also know that during the summer, crime rates also go up as well. So does that mean that what's causing the crime rates to go up is that people are eating more ice cream and there's perhaps something in the ice cream that's making people to commit crimes? No. But as you can see, both of these variables are correlated. So let me give you another example. So we know that plants do photosynthesis, right? So in order to do photosynthesis, what the plants do is that they use carbon dioxide. Okay? And we know that there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So one of the things that we notice is that during the spring, when the plants are basically doing photosynthesis, we see that the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, they actually decrease. And during the winter, when the plants have lost their leaves, we see that the levels of carbon dioxide actually increase in the atmosphere. So we see this beautiful pattern of the levels of carbon dioxide that are decreased during the spring and they actually increase during the winter. So epidemiology is the study of patterns of a disease in a population. This includes the risk factors as well. Could there be some sort of benefit to drinking coffee and the incidence of Parkinson's disease? It could be true. Now, one of the things that is extremely important is to look at the whole picture. It could be that just by chance, those individuals who are drinking coffee, they're doing other things that are helping them to prevent, if you will, the incidence of Parkinson's disease. So it could be that those individuals are perhaps reading more. It could be that perhaps those individuals tend to exercise more. And you also have to consider the sample size. So remember, it's extremely crucial to have a large sample size in order to make a conclusion of an experiment. Now, what you have found in your correlation study can serve as a starting point in order to design an experiment. Remember, in an experiment, you must have at least one control group and one experimental group. And both the experimental group and the control group, the subjects in those groups, must be as similar as possible. So, meaning that if you have males and females in the control group, you must also have males and females in the experimental group. They must also be age matched as well. They basically must be as close match as possible. So if you have some people that are doing exercise in the experimental group, you must also have people that are doing exercise in that control group as well. So basically both conditions has to be as similar as possible. And the only thing that changes in this case is basically the individuals in the experimental group are drinking caffeinated coffee, and the individuals in the control group are either drinking decaffeinated coffee or are not drinking coffee at all. All right, so peer-reviewed journals are very complex. Those are basically hard to read for the common public. Okay, so and it's because it has all kinds of information there. So one of the things that often happen is that in newspapers or just in the news in general, they only give you little bits and pieces of the whole study. They don't give you the entire study. And this is why it's extremely crucial for all of us, okay, and I mean all of us, to basically go back and to do our own research, to actually look at the entire study in order for us to make our own conclusions. And so this is why it's extremely crucial for us as consumers to do our own background research. Because nowadays, you see a lot of commercials that are trying to sell you a miracle pill that is going to cure a million diseases, right? So it is extremely crucial for all of us to be able to analyze graphs, to be able to analyze experiments, to be able to analyze results in order for us to come up with our own conclusions and to determine if in fact what they're claiming in those commercials, if in fact it is true. Again, always ask to show me the data.